Number 5. Grigori Rasputin. Grigori Rasputin, the Mad Monk of Russia, was a mystical healer who wandered Russia in the early 20th century. Now, I could do a plot summary of what Rasputin got up to, but honestly, Boney M did a better job than I ever will, so just I'll tab out of this video real quick, listen to that song, come on back. Okay. Did you? Well, if you didn't, the quick rundown is that the Black Monk genuinely believed himself to be a holy healer with otherworldly powers, and was appointed a lofty position by Tsarina Alexandra to heal the young prince of his hemophilia. He was rumored to be part of a secret order called Klisti, connected with all sorts of scandalous practices. Now, no official connection was ever made to Rasputin and the sect. Rumors of the man still persisted. He carried an infamous reputation around the country, with stories of his wild debauchery and black magic, stories of wild powers. Did he really have otherworldly powers? Given his infamous nigh immortality, I am a bit inclined to agree with him. The man simply could not be put down without serious effort. There was a plot to have him enticed by a courtesan and castrated until he caught wind of it. In 1914, he was in the chest by a beggar and shrugged it off like it was nothing. Now, of course, the most famous story of Rasputin was his assassination at the hands of the Tsar's cousin and a handful of noblemen. As the famous legend goes, he was poisoned, bludgeoned, and drowned, and still that wasn't enough until he passed later in the day. Was Rasputin just Russia's toughest customer, built different? Or did he have some sort of mystical help from another world? We may never know. Hey, are we having fun with the channel, my little freaks and creeps? Stay subscribed for more scary content every single day. Number 4. VLAD the Impaler. You know, with a title like VLAD the Impaler, it's safe to assume that the guy was probably up to no good, demon or no demon. Perhaps you've heard the legend that Vlad Tepes was the inspiration for Count Dracula, which should tell you even more if you want to judge of this guy's moral character. Vlad was a prince of Wallachia, an area that's now known as modern Romania. Vlad grew up in a very dark period of Wallachian history, coming up while the Ottoman Empire was setting its sights on just about everything good in Eastern Europe. Vlad was made king of Wallachia, but first he was deposed and exiled after an assassination plot on his brother and father. He would reclaim the throne in 1458 and quickly began a campaign of bloodlust to show the world he was not someone you should be messing with. One of his most infamous acts, and where the dubious title comes from, was after fending off an Ottoman invasion, he impaled 20,000 soldiers and left them as a grim forest of the damned. And some legends say he would eat dinner in front of this. Downright demonic behavior. There's some debate as to whether or not he really is the inspiration for Dracula, although of note is that beside his infamous sobriquet Vlad the Impaler, he went by the nickname Vlad Dracul, owning from his father's position in the Order of the Dragon, which translated to Dracul. There are also stories of Vlad washing his hands with the blood of his enemies, which I'm gonna be honest, that kind of sounds like something Dracula would do. It's worth noting too, no one really knows what happened to Vlad's body. We know that he was slain in battle, and that he was eventually put down after years of carnage, but his body or grave has never been found. Perhaps it's because it's still walking, or flapping. Whatever a bat does. Number 3. Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper is one of history's most infamous criminals, and honestly, maybe the most. Over 130 years ago, and we are still absolutely fascinated by his crimes, and we still don't even know for certain who he was. Could still be out there, he could still be at large. He terrorized Whitechapel through the year of 1888, leaving behind a series of sickeningly grisly crime scenes, torn apart and left in the street for all to see. There are at least 5 confirmed cases that are attributed to Jack the Ripper, but there are several more that are speculated to be attached to him, with some suggesting that it could be anywhere from 13 or higher. Jack eluded capture, stupefied his pursuers, and taunted his would-be captors, sending the police souvenirs, I guess, from his crimes, wrapping in the mail and sending them out. On one occasion, he did this alongside a threatening letter, boldly claiming to be from hell, known as the From Hell letter. The jeering letter taunted the police, inviting them to catch him, while he described the pleasure he took in his sick, sordid dealings. Investigators were downright stumped trying to find the guy. They suspected he didn't have any level of medical training, as his hurried slashes led them to believe he could have been a butcher. The way he slashed his victims was beyond horrific. He left them missing and in some cases beyond recognition. It seemed too like he could be in multiple places at once. A body discovered in New York a few years after the crime spree matched the victims of Whitechapel almost perfectly. Was it a human performing all these sickening acts? Or could the Ripper's mangling be attributed to a demon that was preying on the women of White Castle? It would explain how he was so elusive and managed to evade capture for all those years. Number 2. Emperor Nero. Now, perhaps you've heard of Emperor Nero. You've probably heard the story of him playing the fiddle as Rome burned around him. But Honestly, historically, that barely even cracks the top 5 craziest things Nero ever accomplished in his tenure as emperor. Nero set a new standard for wildness as a world leader that I think has never been matched again. Where do I begin with him? Let's start off small. He had a dedicated legion of soldiers, referred to as the Augustans, whose sole function was to follow him around and clap and hype him up whenever he would perform. Now that's kind of harmlessly crazy. So what about the story that Nero used to use his enemies as torches for his gardens? Yeah, Nero had a passionate hatred for Christians, blaming them for the infamous fire that engulfed Rome, which some historians believe Nero himself started. That's pretty wild. But what about the fact that Nero would dress himself in the skins of animals with his romantic partners? Or about how he orchestrated the deaths of his mother and brother? Nero ensured his own position as Emperor of Rome. Emperor Claudius married Nero's mother Agrippina, who then adopted Nero as his own son. When Agrippina poisoned Claudius, Nero took the throne, and then to ensure that he could keep that position on that lofty chair, he poisoned his stepbrother and would later poison his own mother to make sure no one could challenge him as emperor. He then enjoyed all the pleasures of Rome as much as he could. He depleted the treasury of Rome at one point solely to make a statue of himself in his own honor, the Colossus of Nero, to leave a lasting legacy. In the end, after years of insanity, Nero took his own life by ordering one of his own servants to stab him after being told he would be executed by the state as he was considered an enemy of Rome. He bemoaned what an artist the world was losing. Nero's proclivity for wild debauchery, outrageous pursuits of pleasure, intense wanton cruelty, and violence towards Christians led some people at the time to view Nero as the Antichrist himself. And to be honest, I get it. Number 1. Manson. Charles Manson. The most infamous cult leader in history, and he might very well be one of the most famous criminals of all time. Charles Manson had a hypnotic level of control over his devout followers, leading them to a dark crime spree that would claim the lives of 35 people. Now, Manson himself never raised a blade to anyone that we know of, but rather used his domineering charisma to orchestrate the slayings down to the littlest details. He had a grim vision of an apocalypse where he believed there was going to be a race war, and that his family needed to prepare for this. And part of these preparations was bumping off key celebrities he had a list of. Manson had dominion over his followers, giving them sacrament every day when in reality he was just giving them illegal substances to keep them impressionable. He banned glasses, calendars, watches, clocks, and anything that would ground them to the real world and made them more malleable to his will. Now, Manson and his family are host to a number of conspiracy theories. There's a very popular one saying that Manson himself is a product of the CIA's MK Ultra brainwashing program, and this is why he was so effective at controlling other people, and that the whole Manson family cult was a CIA op to destabilize the hippie movement. But another very prevailing theory is that the Manson family were Satanists, and they were part of a nationwide cabal connected with other dark crimes around the same time, like the Son of Sam. Manson's obsession with evil, his dark dealings, and complete control over his subjects do make him seem a bit like a modern-day Lucifer. Could Manson have had a supernatural level of control over people?
Kicking this list off, we have Frankenstein. Okay, not really the Dr. Frankenstein that we know and love, but the man who Mary Shelley based the novel off of, and around. Well, one of them at least. Mad scientists are still puzzled by the works of one Johann Conrad Dippel. Dippel was born at Castle Frankenstein in Germany, where he would attend university as a philosopher. He studied theology, philosophy, and alchemy at the University of Gießen, obtaining a master's degree in 1693. In the 1700s, he then turned to Hermetic studies and alchemy, and this is where it gets a little mad scientisty. There are claims that during his experiments at Castle Frankenstein, he practiced alchemy and anatomy at the same time, on both the living and the deceased. Yeah. Creepy. Dippel even said that the rumors were true that he had sold his soul to the devil in exchange for secret knowledge. Yeah, that'll do it. He had a huge reputation surrounding dark sorcery, specifically for his work around the Philosopher's Stone and his claim to fame, the elixir of life. He performed experiments with cadavers and attempted to transfer the soul of one to another. Yeah, he was obsessed with this idea of soul transference with barely and freshly dead people. Common experiments among alchemists at the time though. One night apparently while he was working with nitroglycerin and the effect on magnetism and electricity apparently led to the destruction and a huge explosion at Castle Frankenstein. It was this night that he apparently was messing around with lightning and the answer to all his ailments came to him. Local mythology and lore recounts huge explosions and lightning emitted from the castle that night. I guess this was a pretty infamous night. It seems like it's right out of the book, no? Apparently this was the night he acquired the knowledge behind creating the elixir of life, his pride and joy. So what exactly happened that night at Castle Frankenstein? Huge lightning storm, or was this guy opening portals looking for souls? You tell me. Number 4, Electro. Okay, they were definitely onto something back then. Lots of magnets and souls and electricity going on. It's 1803. Giovanni Aldini was an Italian physician and physicist born in Bologna, Italy. He, just like the other Dr. Frankenstein, liked to conduct high amounts of electricity through corpses to see what they could do. Yeah, sinister stuff. But science, you know? They like to do these crazy experiments and then write it down and stuff. Lab coats, you know. I have a weak stomach. I could never have sat through these experiments. Since electricity was relatively new at the time, all these zany ideas from these mad scientists multiplied the more playing around with it. Soon, it became otherworldly. The obsession around electricity, magnets, souls, other realms, they were hypothesizing leading to some pretty evil stuff. In 1803, the fresh body of a murderer was pulled down from the gallows of Newgate Prison in London and taken to the Royal College of Surgeons for experimenting. There, before an audience of doctors and physicists, Giovanni attempted to breach realms and return the corpse from beyond the grave. Ooh. Okay. Homemade batteries and magnets was used, which made the deceased muscles contort aggressively, and apparently his eyes even opened, looking around the room. Giovanni then stuck the rod where the sun don't shine, then made the whole body start to move about as if it had come to life. For years, he was the leading scientist in electricity and its effect on the body. Apparently, some claim that Aldini would even experiment on himself, pushing the limits and dialing up the voltage. Dude, this guy's Electro from Spider-Man. In recognition of his merits, the Emperor of Austria made him a Knight of the Iron Crown and died not many years later. And although he was unsuccessful at bringing souls back from the dead using electricity, I'm sure this guy experienced more than he shared. I wonder who has his journal. Number 3. No, I'm Spartacus. Actually, much more evil than him. Heinrich Müller. Born in Munich, Germany, April 1900. After serving as a pilot in World War I, he joined the police in Munich, soon acquiring a reputation as a skilled investigator. As such, he would draw the attention of 2 nastier men, Heinrich H. and Reinhard H., leaders of the German SS army. Yeah, I don't even like saying their full names out loud. Just Google them up, you'll know. Müller entered the SS in 1934 and quickly rose through the ranks of the organization as a police official. In 1939, when the Gestapo police force and the other organizations joined the Reich, Müller was made head honcho. Yeah, basically this guy was like next in charge to you know who. He was a pretty scary and powerful guy. Müller was involved in a ton of criminal affairs. He helped plan the Polish attack, he signed the bullet order, he authorized the torture of officers who had conspired to kill other SS soldiers. People knew him and knew of him. He was, unfortunately, infamous and a huge deal. This is the weird part. When the Allies moved in and they arrested him, the man turned out to be another Müller. Okay. In fact, they couldn't find the Heinrich Müller, instead arresting many others of the same name. The head of the Gestapo wanted for crimes against humanity had vanished without even a trace. Gone. Even the CIA were like, okay, where the hell did this guy just go? He was just right here. He apparently vanished in the last days of the war. The Western Secret Services started many investigations over the years, but Müller and the vast majority of the Gestapo secret files were never found. In 2001, the CIA reopened its archives about the SS war criminal and revealed it still knew nothing new or conclusive about the SS Heinrich Müller who had been in charge all those years ago. Where did this guy vanish to? I don't know. Number 2, us. Sure, I've had my fair share of sibling rivalry. One's better at this, one's better at that. But these siblings took it to a whole other realm. The Han twins, or as I like to call it, the story of good versus evil. A tale as old as time. Well, not that long ago, actually. During the 90s, this was a huge case plastered on every screen of the attempted murder of Sunny Han by her identical twin sister, Gina Han. Whoa. It's November 6, 1996 in California. It quickly became a jaw-dropping case in the media as the case touched on themes of broken families, sister rivalry, split personas, and of course, parallel universes. The sisters had always had disagreements, but apparently hatred became obsession. Throwing some hands here and there became stalking, and eventually jail time. The older they got, the more things escalated. Gina, after escaping prison, had drummed up the idea to hire 2 teenagers to kidnap her sister. Uh-oh. During the kidnapping, the plan, however, failed, and the two men were quickly taken into custody by police. Just before going to Sonny's apartment, they went to buy large garbage bags, duct tape, wine, gloves, Pine Sol cleaner, and magazines. Yeah. The police were notified and luckily reached them before Sonny's evil plan could commence. And it was a close one. They, including the evil sister, were locked and loaded. Literally. Scary. Yeah, as in she literally dodged a bullet on that one. This is like the Metal Mario version of yourself, isn't it? This is terrifying. Do you even think you could take an evil version of yourself? It's sad that it's family, you know? The jury reached their verdict as to each defendant on November 20th, 1997, and Han was convicted of all charges, which were 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder, 2 counts of burglary, 2 counts of false imprisonment, and 1 count of possession of a weapon. So why did she hate her sister so much? How come she wanted to take over her life and just live one? This has evil parallel universe written all over it, dude. And number 1, the gods. Peru contains its fair share of ancient megalithic ruins. I'll do it again, sorry. Peru contains its fair share of ancient megalithic ruins. If you're not familiar with the construction and myths behind the Machu Picchu and the Nazca lines, then this next one may make you scratch your head. Some would say those are cute compared to this next rock? I don't know. The door in Hayumarca, some think it's a wall, but most believe it becomes a portal to the beyond. The story of the Gate of the Gods, also known as Door of Hayumarca, begins near the banks of the Titicaca over half a millennium ago. According to Incan legend, the universe began here, and according to researchers, the Incan Empire fell here, somewhere around 1592. Peruvians tell the tale of an Incan priest who barely escaped slaughter from the conquistador forces. His name was Aramu Muru, and he was a powerful high priest who served in the Temple of the Seven Rays. To escape his imminent death at the hands of the Spanish army, Muru fled to Hayumarca with the help of other priests, and using a golden disc key, Muru opened the small door in the face of the rock, apparently venturing into another realm. According to legend, the stone door transformed into a bright tunnel that was lit with an unearthly blue light. Aramu Muru passed through the barrier and entered the void, upon which the door then closed behind him. Spooky. Many people believe that he is now living in the land of the gods. Many still believe he is to return with the knowledge of the other side. I mean, if this guy just like platform 9 3/4'd himself through a perfectly sanded rock face, yeah, I'm gonna say it's ancient aliens. Right away, 100%. This site's also been said to be aligned by 5 other archaeological sites, which together form an imaginary cross with straight lines crossing each other exactly at the point where this plateau and lake are located. That makes it even creepier. Coming in at number 5, Michael Taylor. It's 1974, Yorkshire, England. Michael Taylor, age 31, father of 5 and husband to Christine Taylor. Michael was a well-mannered and caring father and husband. Michael, like anyone, became depressed from a back injury, left him short on work and seeming a little odd and off. After seeking religious advice and a one-on-one session at a local church, Michael started having outbursts and acting aggressively. Puzzled, he sought one-on-one sessions which turned ugly. After apparently changing form and attacking Marie, a young religious leader helping Taylor and unable to remember anything, Michael and the church agreed that an exorcism was necessary. Father Peter Vincent and Reverend Raymond Smith met at St. Thomas and started. It got so violent, he was tied to the church floor. After hours in the middle of the night, the two had managed to exorcise more than 40 demons out of Michael, in which appeared around them as they exited. Violence continued, leaving only 3 demons remaining for the next day. After returning home from the first session, Michael was found now only hours later, naked, in the middle of the street, covered head to toe in blood. Michael had returned home, to which then his wife and family dog lay dead as the police arrived in the AM. His wife, missing her eyes, tongue, and skin from the front of her skull. The dog, torn limb from limb and spread around the home. He was arrested soon after for the death of his wife. Michael had this to say about his late wife in court, quote, "I am released. I am released. It is done. The evil in her has been destroyed." Yeah, that was definitely a vessel for him. He was acquitted on psychological conditions, and jury found that he met his breaking point during the exorcism that night. He was acquitted on insanity and remained in and out of facilities until he passed in 2013. Number 4, David Berkowitz. New York, 1976, and the police were busy on the search for a man shooting couples in the New York area, which had started to become a citywide phenomenon that summer. Brunette women with long hair frantically cut and dyed their hair blonde in fear. The .44 caliber killer was the title the press gave David in his earliest of assaults. After losing his job, David began to experience psychotic episodes and claimed that his neighbor's German Shepherd had begun talking to him and eventually explained to David that he was a demon. He took the name after the pet's owner, Sam. It was this dog who ordered the killings by David and claims that the pet coaxed David into killing. David used this summer to shoot 8 people, resulting in 6 lives and the stabbings of 2 others. Using his .44 caliber bulldog revolver, David sent police on a wild goose chase around New York City with handwritten letters, David mocking the detectives with cryptic messages. Some of them explain who Sam is, and some of them explain what Sam does. Some mock police, saying that they are never going to find or stop him. David was finally arrested just hours before his next planned victim's visit. He applauded police in their ability to stop him, in the back seat of the car, laughing and cheering. Although David pleaded not guilty to insanity and pleaded guilty, expressing that he was coaxed by the demon and that it demanded him to kill for hell, he was sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences with parole after 25 years. During the mid-90s, he amended his confession and claimed that he had been a member of a violent satanic cult that orchestrated the incidents as ritual murder and pleaded guilty to stabbing and attempting to murder others before the shootings had even begun. His letters are public and spine-chilling. Check them out. Real Riddler stuff. Quote, "I am the monster. I am Beelzebub. I am the chubby behemoth. Police, let me haunt you with this. I'll be back. I'll be back. Yours in murder, Mr. Monster." Okay, his violent spree led the legal system to create a new law called Son of Sam's Law, designed to create criminals from financially profiting from the publicity created by their crimes, which at the time, he was basically a celebrity. He remains in prison to this day. Number 3, Herbert Mullin. 1970s again. At the exact same time, in the same area, police had 2 serial killers to keep up with, Herbert Mullin and Edmund Kemper. No relationship to each other or each other's cases. Mullin was a paranoid schizophrenic in and out of mental health facilities in California during his teens. Mullin then kills 14 people during a 4-month period due to, quote, the impending natural disaster that would happen if he didn't. Mullin was convinced that the voice in his head he was hearing was telepathic. Mullin claims the voice of the Father had explained that the Vietnam War acted as a giant sacrifice that saved us from an earthquake and another one was coming soon. Constantly hearing the man's voice named the Father, encouraging him to gain more blood sacrifices, Mullin bludgeoned a man to death with a baseball bat. Mullin claims that the man was actually Jonah from the Bible and was begging him to sacrifice himself to Mullin. He then murdered a woman in the front seat of his car before dismembering her in a nearby park. Yeah, this is real satanic stuff, I told you. His third victim, a priest that he was confessing to in a Catholic church. Mullin says the priest claims to have telepathically begged him to sacrifice his life for the cause. Mullin then killed 5 people in one day. He claims that all the victims telepathically begged to be sacrificed as a good deed to the Father. Herbert Mullin remains in custody, and who was the father who kept talking to him through all of these people? Number 2, Richard Ramirez. This next guy is really nasty and deserves to be in the second spot. 13 counts of murder, 5 attempted murders, 11 assaults, and 14 burglaries. Sounds like a hell of a guy. The Night Stalker. Charming name for what this man did. Born in Texas, his older brother went to Vietnam and returned with some pretty gruesome stories and some pretty gruesome visuals. The young Ramirez, soaking all of this up, grows up obsessed with the satanic occult and fascinated. He made various references to Satan during his legal proceedings. His trial began in 1989 and he was convicted of 13 murders and a variety of other crimes. Nearly 2 months later, he was sentenced to death, with the judge stating that his crimes showed, quote, cruelty, callousness, and viciousness beyond any human understanding. And the worst part was that he made most of his victims pray to Satan and swear on Satan that they were going to tell him the truth whatever he asked. I'm not really going to get into the sick details of really what this man did, nor will I with the number 1 spot, but it involved hammers, machetes, ropes, knives, guns, you name it, anything violent. He was an absolute nasty creature that liked to torture his victims and really drive the satanic love for you-know-who. First responders would have taken pictures of numerous satanic symbols drawn on the walls in almost a ritualistic reenactment. He was captured by the use of the huge media surrounding his story on the way to take his next victim's life. His trial was truly a disgusting display of media attention, one of the most expensive court cases to date, losing only to O.J. Simpson. He screamed "Hail Satan" at his hearing and flashed self-harm pentagrams. He died of cancer in 2013. This guy must have signed some sort of book for you-know-who. Coming in at number 1, Charles Manson. Okay, so most of us are all familiar with this man and his famous case amongst American pop culture. Ramirez was said to have been a copycat of this man, and I can see why with all the satanicness. California in the late 1960s. A criminal, musician, and a victim of LSD studies, Charles Manson would go on to start and lead the Manson family cult. A small religious group with unclear motives but lost souls and a ton of drugs, and a father to now a family. In summer 1969, some of the cult members committed murders in LA. Apparently Manson had ordered his followers to kill the people who had lived at the address he had given them for their initiation. The murder of actress Sharon Tate and 4 others in her home on August 8th and 9th, including the LaBiancas the next day, another 2 victims. 4 members of the family committed the murders under Manson's instructions and satanic offering. Manson apparently heard voices that there was going to be a race war brought on by religious disputes, and that these killings were an offering to who exactly? The famous helter-skelter message, incoherent scribbles, blood all over the walls. They were then to hide underground in, quote, the bottomless pit under Death Valley, which Manson knew the location of, but instead were caught on the run days later. Manson was sentenced to life in prison under the pretense that he was the one who targeted, planned, and brainwashed his, quote, piggies into committing. While in prison, Charles was diagnosed with schizophrenia and paranoid delusion disorder, seeing visions and hearing voices for more than half of his life. He died in prison in 2017. Yeah, I've seen what Tarantino did with his latest movie, and it's definitely a subtle PG-13 fiction version of what actually went down on that night. What do you guys think? Do you think Charles saw the devil? I think he actually was the devil.